Everyone on Zoom, you hear me all right? Excellent. All right, Chabot, say good morning. Let us begin. So we are picking up, continuing in Os Samich in Tzdikas Hatzaddik. So remember again, we left off on page Kuf Mem Vav in the Biurei Hasidus. We left off in the right-hand paragraph, right at the end of that first paragraph by the brackets. So Reb Tzaddik introduced us to this incredible concept that although there is a mitzvah of tochacha, there is a mitzvah of rebuke, hochiach tochiach es hamisecha, that a person ultimately, again, should go ahead and give. And remember, we spoke about yesterday, the word rebuke has such a negative connotation and sounds so harsh and caustic. But whereas, remember again, the biblical mitzvah of tochacha, of rebuke, is one that is motivated out of love. That I love my friend so much that I cannot stand idly by and watch while they commit something wrong, because I recognize that through their commission of some type of misdeed, at the end of the day, they're going to be put at a disadvantage. But Reb Tzaddik really introduced us to is this concept that before one rebukes another, and before one goes ahead and mochiach another, one must make sure that one is free of that very same sin. So remember again, Reb Tzaddik is speaking about this on a biblical level, I should say on a spiritual level, because halacha l'maisa in the event, I forgot to bring out copies. I didn't hear some for tomorrow. Because remember, Tzaddik says, if I am not free from this very sin, then ultimately, again, the Beis Din Shamal, the heavenly court, opens up the file on me and says, wonderful, you're rebuking someone else. So excellent, if you're rebuking someone else, that must mean that you are free of this very same sin. So Beis Din will go ahead and open up my files. Now, Reb Tzaddik understands this for the following reason. Just in the dynamic, but we're going to point out another dynamic as well. Reb Tzaddik's idea is that when you rebuke another person, you cause them pain. You cause them pain. And we spoke about, again, no matter what the source of that rebuke is, whether it's accidental rebuke, intentional rebuke, the idea is when I mochiach someone, I rebuke someone, I cause them pain. So it's interesting, almost like Reb Tzaddik is saying, is that if you're going to cause someone pain, make sure you have the license to do so, even if your intentions are good. And the license to do so is if you are free from that very same sin. But if you are in the same boat as the person you are rebuking, then you have no right to cause that person any level of tsar. So he writes over here in the brackets, V'zeh kigam habusha v'hatzar v'agmas nefesh sheyesh la'adam ba'avur avono kisha'anashim mochich nosalav. That when a person is rebuked for the averos that he has committed, there is an element of embarrassment, there is an element of pain, and agmas nefesh, and just almost like inner turmoil. Sheyesh la'adam ba'avur avono, that a person has regarding his sin when others rebuke him about it. Harigam tsar zeh nechshav hu liyisurin shel onesh v'kapara ala avono zeh. So I will say the tsar and the agmas nefesh, the pain that I experience through tochacha, through being rebuked about my behavior, on one hand, the powerful part of that is that counts as yisurin, right? That counts as part of my suffering. Remember again, suffering is profound and powerful, and yet it has the ability to purge me of my sin. So when Reuven comes along and rebukes me for my aveira, so the truth is, the pain I feel from that is cathartic pain. It's part of my kapara. But the Rebbe goes on, he says, however, v'yesh al zeh haklal shekol mi shemanish es zulaso alul lehi anish ba'ose inyan chas v'shalom im eino naki legamrei mimeni lechalutin. So I'll say, so now Reb Tzaddik is just saying, I want you to understand why it is so severe that if I rebuke someone over a particular aveira, and I myself am guilty of that aveira, that I am held liable for that. And that's because Reb Tzaddik says, when you rebuke someone, you're causing them pain. You're causing them pain. So I will say, the notion of causing someone else pain is a very dramatic idea, both in halacha as well as hashkafa. So Reb Tzaddik says, if you're going to cause them pain, and you yourself are coming from a vantage point, ultimately, where you've worked on this particular issue, you've worked through this particular issue, you've rectified this particular issue, that's fine. But to cause someone else pain, when you yourself are afflicted with the same spiritual malady, when you yourself are struggling with the same thing, that you don't have the right to do. V'lachin, yesh la'adam hamochiach es zulaso lihizar ulahakpid sheyeh hu ba'atzmo naki legamrei bazeh inyan shamochiach es zulaso. Therefore, says Reb Tzaddik, before you're going to rebuke someone else, make sure that you are free from that very same iniquity, from that very same chait. So also I want to point out, Moshe pointed out, one second, there's Reb Tzaddik saying that I can never give rebuke. So also remember again, Reb Tzaddik is not saying that, right? Because remember, there is still a biblical mitzvah of hochiach tochiach es hamisecha. There is a mitzvah on the books that if you see someone doing something wrong, you are supposed to be mochiach them, you're supposed to rebuke them. Is there a better English word than rebuke? Is there a better word? Okay, I just want to point out, you understand, when I use the word rebuke, criticize is not better. What was it? Admonish. I don't know. All of these words have that. I just want to point out that the biblical mitzvah of mochiach is not yelling at someone. That's all I just want to point out. Right? It's speaking in a very soft voice, and it's speaking in a very loving way, but it's saying things that may be difficult to hear. So I want to be clear. Reb Tzaddik is not negating the biblical precept of tochacha. He's not saying there's no mitzvah of rebuking. He's just saying there's a prerequisite. I'm sorry? First you do yourself, right? So that's all Reb Tzaddik is saying is, of course there's a mitzvah of rebuke. And of course there are times in life when you have to go ahead and point something out to someone. But Reb Tzaddik says the prerequisite for that is, are you in the spot? Are you in the zone? Are you in the place? Are you in the level of personal preparedness to deliver this to someone else? And all Reb Tzaddik is saying is, I must make sure that I am in the proper spiritual space to deliver this message of rebuke to another. That's the entire essence of this. Am I in the space to be able to go ahead and do this? If the answer is yes, then not only can I do it, but I may even have a mitzvah to do it. But if not, Reb Tzaddik says, work on yourself first before you go ahead and rebuke someone else. It was a very profound yisod. Now, like Moshe mentioned, do I think that the way this turns out is therefore, 7 out of 10 times you don't end up rebuking someone else? Probably. Because at the end of the day, I'll say something interesting. What's often, the Baal Shem Tov HaKadosh explains that often the faults and shortcomings in others that we often see first are the ones that exist within ourselves, right? The Baal Shem Tov actually has this concept that the world is your mirror. We often see ourselves in the world. So it's fascinating, if we're honest with ourselves, that when I pick up on something on someone else, it's amazing. If I'm honest with myself, those are my own deficiencies. So Reb Tzaddik is alerting us to this idea that sometimes, when I'm ready to be mochiach, when I'm ready to rebuke someone else, because I see such a glaring deficiency, Reb Tzaddik just says, hold up. Because is what you're seeing in the other really what's broken inside of you? And many times the answer to that is yes. Again, all the time, not necessarily. We'll say, there's another piece to Reb Tzaddik as well, why this piece is very important. They will say, what's the point of the mitzvah of hochacha? What's the point of the mitzvah of rebuke? What's the point? To better the other person, right? You will say, remember again, the goal of this mitzvah is not to yell at someone, right? Not to make it, ooh, that felt good, right? Nothing makes a person feel good like a good dose of rebuke first thing in the morning, right? I mean, not getting it, I mean, giving it. Right? That's not the point. The point over here is because I love my fellow Jew. I see someone doing something. It's the same way, by the way. You ever have a situation where, chas v'shalom, your child runs across the street and without looking, and no one ever says, shefala, mamala, tatala, maybe don't do that again. Maybe new age parenting is like that, right? Maybe don't do that again. Maybe don't do that again. The reflexive reaction is you yell your kishkas out at your kid, right? It's not anger. It's because I love my child so much. And the notion that they just placed themselves in danger elicits such a visceral response. I'm not angry. I'm I'm in love, right? I love my child so much that it's going to evoke this reaction. So the Hatzaddik says the mitzvah of tochacha is not motivated out of anger and animosity, it's motivated out of love. So my goal is, I see my fellow Jew doing something wrong. It hurts me that they're doing it. I want them to course correct. You know, both say, any one of us who has ever received rebuke, right? And I'm assuming that's all of us, any tochacha, and knows what it feels like sometimes to get rebuke from someone who themselves is a very broken person. What's the first reaction when you receive rebuke like that? Right? The first reaction? Really? Really? Let me get this straight. You're giving me tochacha? You're giving me rebuke? Maybe it's could I save your breath a little bit and go ahead and work on yourself. We've all been on the receiving end of that kind of rebuke where it just feels so disingenuous because the person who's giving it, him or herself, is such a flawed person. But say this is the other piece. The Tzdikas says the mitzvah of tochacha is not simply to let off steam. It's not simply to yell at someone to make yourself feel better. It's because I care about the other person. I see what you're doing is wrong, and I want you to be better. So Tzdikas says the goal is to have your words heard. The goal is to have your words heeded. So when does that work? If I'm myself in a situation where I'm on the right spiritual level. If I'm holding in the place where, again, the person who's on the receiving end says, you know what, that guy, okay, I hear it. It stings a little bit because it always stings. It always stings. But I hear it. I hear where it's coming from. I understand the person. I know that this is someone who works on himself. So it's really two things I will say. It's number one, this idea about a tzaddik, that namely, if I go ahead and I give tochacha regarding something that I myself am imperfect in, I've caused someone tsar through my tochacha. The Beis Din Shalmal says, 1 second, you're causing someone tsar in an area that you yourself are deficient? That's not so pashat. That's not so pashat. That's aleph. And beis, if my goal is that the tochacha be heard, the best way to allow your tochacha to be heard is to go ahead and to make yourself into the kind of person who, when others receive tochacha from me, they'll say, okay, that person may not be perfect, but at the end of the day, that is an individual who clearly works on himself, and I understand that what he is saying out of concern and love for me. Masha'inkein, if I'm a profoundly broken person, and I then give tochacha, 9 out of 10 times no one's ever going to listen, because at the end of the day, the source of that tochacha is severely compromised. Well, so we'll stop over here for today. We'll pick up, we'll spend one more day in Eretz Yisrael on Seif tomorrow, to be continued. Of course.